Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Doug Hall. I'm going to be your co-host and moderator today. We're very excited to be joined by Phil Sorgen, the Chief Revenue Officer of Ringcentral. Him and I are going to have a great discussion today around the value of a winning culture and doing it all through a global brand. So thank you for everybody for joining us and being part of this conversation. We will officially get started here in a couple of minutes. We're going to let some other folks come into the conference link. But this is going to be an awesome conversation between Phil and I. Phil has an amazing background at Microsoft and also just recently joined Ringcentral within the last year to really help build out their culture and brand as the Chief Revenue Officer. So we're excited to have Phil part of this conversation. So we will get started here in about a minute. This is going to be an awesome conversation. We're also going to leave about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you do have any questions that come up around your organization, the way that you're thinking about building a winning culture and the value of it for your organization, please use the Q&A section of the webinar to be able to put in your questions and your comments. We want to try to make this as interactive as possible at the end. So Phil's got a great background, some great experience. So we'd love to share some of his knowledge today at the end with everybody as well. So thank you for everybody for joining us. Let's officially kick this off, Phil. Let's officially get going. I'll do just a quick intro. My name is Doug Hall. I'm the SVP of Sales here at Comparably. We are a platform that helps companies tell their story about their culture and brand through the voice of their what we feel is the most valuable asset that a company has through the voice of their current employees. And so I'm going to be your co-host and moderator. I'm very lucky to be joined by Phil Sorgen, Chief Revenue Officer at Ringcentral. So Phil, I'll kick it off with you. I'd love to just, have you do a quick intro about yourself and your background, and would love to just dive into a little bit more about your background as well to start off the conversation that we're going to have here today. So Phil, thanks for having us, and kick it over to you.
Thank you, Doug. It's great to be here, and I love the topic. I could talk about culture all day long. I believe deeply in Peter Drucker's view that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And so it's great to be here. So just a little bit about me. I've been in this industry for, gosh, I have to admit it, it's 30 years now. I work at Ringcentral now as the Chief Revenue Officer, but actually in 30 years, it's only my third company, and I've only been at Ringcentral 100 days officially today.
Oh, nice.
So 24 years at Microsoft and about 7 years at AT&T prior to that. And along the way, I've had the great good fortune to work in small and mid-market, to run an international subsidiary at Microsoft in Canada. I've run large enterprises. I've been a global channel chief, and that's what's so exciting about this role at Ringcentral, where I have an opportunity to really look across the entire go-to-market for Ringcentral, from channels to small and mid-market to enterprise and everything in between. So I'm really excited to be here.
Cool. No, thanks for that, Phil. So let me just ask you this, and let's just start there. Like, you had this amazing run at Microsoft. Definitely was in multiple leadership roles for that organization, like you mentioned, for about a 24 year run there. An amazing global brand. Everybody knows who Microsoft is. What made you make the leap? Like, what was it about the culture or the brand of Ringcentral that made you decide to join them and what they're up to?
Yeah, so you can imagine I've been asked that question, and sometimes I'm not sure whether the question is more about leaving Microsoft or the notion of anybody who's been at any company for 24 years. It's a big decision to leave. So I'll actually share my reasoning because I think it's useful to a lot of people, more on the aspect of the principles. I think we're always when you're in a role, you're always thinking about, am I being challenged? Am I continuing to grow? Am I learning? Am I excited? I'm a big believer that you spend so many hours of your non-sleeping time at work that you have to get joy. You have to find challenge. So I think everybody takes those moments that there's some trigger that says, hey, I'm ready to do something next. And in that journey, sometimes you look only internally, sometimes you look internally and externally. For 24 years, I predominantly looked internally. That doesn't mean I didn't ever look externally, but this time the right opportunity I found just happened to be externally. And the other thing I tell people is, when I went through this process, whether it was internally or externally, I always looked at a couple of core principles. Sure. And those principles were, especially for when I was having discussions externally, is if I'm going to leave after a long investment of time in a company, it needs to be measurably different, meaning I have an opportunity to grow. And so going to another 100,000 employee company was not a consideration for me. And Ringcentral is far from small at over 6,000 employees and $1 billion of annual run rate, but it's certainly a different stage in its corporate life cycle than Microsoft was in. The second thing is, knowing what you get so much passion in. And over the last 7-8 years, I've been talking to companies as a Microsoft leader in various roles about how they could take advantage of technology to digitally transform their organization, to drive the business outcomes they were trying to achieve. So that had to be really important. And when I looked at Ringcentral and I saw that every company is trying to communicate and collaborate more effectively, they're all trying to be more mobile, they're all trying to be more data driven, and Ringcentral is at the heart of that. It's just another validation that this was a place to go to tackle the next challenge in my career. And and there's a few other principles, but always be principle driven in how you evaluate next role, whether it's an internal opportunity or an external opportunity. And that's what it was for me.
No, that's totally fair. And I think you're right. Like, I think we definitely do spend sometimes more time with the folks that we work with than our own families at times. So you got to really make sure, like, hey, are these the people that I want to be spending my time with? And then I also like your point on, hey, kind of using the internal factors and the external factors to help you make those decisions. So that's an awesome point. So when it comes to your role specifically as the chief revenue officer at Ringcentral, like, what do you think your role is when it comes to shaping the company's culture and brand? Like, what are two things that you're specifically focused on when it comes to culture and brand and the role that you play in that?
Yeah, so I'd say it on a couple of dimensions. From first of all, because my primary role within a broader leadership team, the slot I fly, if you will, is around go-to-market and having the right strategy and building an evolving strategy of how we go from $1 billion today to 5 or 10 billion into the future. So there's a great growth opportunity for our company that's built on innovation, built on partnerships, and built on the processes and approach that we take to market across our customer segments. But key to that is being as part of the executive team, part of how we define our brand, and how you'll execute and attract employees and attract partnerships and ultimately attract customers is how you lead through the culture of the organization. And this is where I get into the concepts that drive culture, things like having a growth mindset and always challenging the norms, having a culture that people always believe they can come, that they can learn something, that they don't know it all. They have an opportunity to learn it all through the engagement with their peers. Those are things that are really key to breaking into new markets and into leading. So part of culture is bringing that growth approach. The second part of culture is communications, generating excitement, creating a place for people to learn. Like, the great thing is Ringcentral has, I'll say, a platform of 3 areas of deep focus, specifically around culture that we're addressing. One is diversity and inclusion to help create belonging. The other is professional development to create opportunities for our employees. And the other one is leadership to create purpose. And when you enhance those things, those are the elements that help your people be their best. So bring this growth mindset, this learn it all culture, this customer first mentality, and then anchor it with the capabilities that are so important to having people perform at their best.
Mm-hmm. No, so I love it. It's, definitely a lot around growth mindset, giving your employees the opportunity to grow and change with the organization, both personally, professionally, creating a place that's inclusive. So you have different people sitting at the table helping you make decisions, and also, letting people take ownership, it sounds like, from a leadership standpoint, to be able to grow. So, where those are all great values and all those things, where do you think that in terms of building that and getting that relayed to your employees and having them feel that and follow through on that from a culture standpoint, from a brand standpoint, do you think Ringcentral is at today, and getting your employees and your culture and your customers to adopt that culture to help you build that from a brand standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really important actually right now.
Yeah.
Not it was always important. Let me be super clear. Always important, but right now is an unprecedented time, and we're all learning how to work remotely. There's less face to face, so and that's different for different people. So I point that out to then take a step back. That the first thing to build culture is have examples you can share. I mean, are you really living it? It starts there, and there's a number of things that we can really point to, both in brand. You look at Ringcentral, and we've now crossed officially the $1 billion annual revenue annual run rate threshold. Forbes just recognized us as a Global 2000 company now, and that's a new entry for us. Vlad was recognized as as UCAS Leader of the Year by UC Today. We were again named Best Unified Communications Platform for 2020. Gartner has us in the Magic Quadrant in the upper right. So there's a lot of material, and you can't take that for granted. You have to make sure the employees understand that, and understand that how impactful our brand is, especially because we're not a consumer brand, right? We're a business to business brand. So you want them to understand what it stands for. But then on culture, there's also things that we can lean on, and stories we can tell and demonstrate day to day. Things like, again, Vlad being recognized actually by Comparably, best CEO for diversity and women, best company for leadership and professional development. Those are things we take a lot of pride in because we feel like we earn those, but then you also have to tell those stories and then demonstrate it, back it up with actions every single day. And the other things that we're doing during this time is we're creating lots of opportunities for employees to engage, and we're infusing those messages into it. We just kicked off a program where all of our executive leadership team have signed up for regular roundtables. So we're basically spreading everybody out. We had employee engagement literally facilitate the process, and they're called gatherings. Gatherings, get it? But they're gatherings so that we just have small groups of people engaging with our executives just so we can listen to them. And then it gives us an opportunity through the Q&A session to reinforce some of the points, but also take the feedback of our employees. We regularly have listening mechanisms through polling our employees and listening, both in pulse surveys and annual surveys. We've moved to an annual meeting, video based, but we're now doing it monthly because we think we need to tell the stories and share the examples. We're also really amplifying employee resource groups, which is a great sense of a belonging for employees that they can participate in virtually, and those infuse your culture and your values. So we're really doing a lot of things because different people participate in different ways to get the message out there, but it starts with the actions. You actually really have to do the things if you want to tell the stories.
Yeah, so it sounds like obviously backing up what you say your culture and values are going to be, and then it sounds like the second piece is just getting examples and getting your employees to go out there and be the mouthpiece for you. There's no greater validation than if your employees start talking about your culture, your brand, and then that's when you know you're doing the right things. I'd love to hear kind of your take too. Like, obviously there's a lot you're doing internally, but I'm sure that part of your role is also making sure that you're hiring the right people for your culture and your brand. So how do you think about using those stories to tell about Ringcentral's brand externally to attract the right talent, the right customers, to make sure that your culture and brand continues to grow where you want it to go as an organization?
Yeah, no, I couldn't, absolutely. And you made a comment, Doug, at the very beginning that the importance of employees, the
Yeah.
people in an organization. My quote, one that I have said over and over and over, literally 1,000 times in my career, is that people are the single sustainable competitive advantage for an organization. I deeply believe that, and that means so recruiting and getting the best people into your organization that fit your culture, that can be successful and drive your values, is so important. I always tell managers, especially new managers, people that are their first time to management, that the single most important decision you will make in your job is the hiring of an employee. Because that will determine, that is the determination of your success. But to recruit the best, you have to be able to share those things, share the things that you just described, the way we embrace culture, what we stand for, what our mission is, having a simple mission like helping simplify business communication so people can really understand at the core what you do, and then the culture being how we rally the team and how we, what we embrace, and then what our values are. Everybody, I think, understands those clearly, and we make sure we're consistent in our interview panels around sharing those messages, because we do believe that interviewing is a two-way street. The best candidates are interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them in the process. So we have to show up great every single day in those interview processes, so that we ask the right questions to find people that are a great fit, that can help grow us, help us succeed, help us serve our customers better. But we also have to show up as a great company that has the right values, that has the right culture. So we have to make sure we bring that into the interview process ourselves. So we do actually bring all of those stories that I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm gonna have to. I can't hear you, so if you will
No.
give me 1 second
No
to
worries.
drop off and join right back in. I apologize for this technical difficulty. I know you can hear me because I can see your reaction.
Yep. No worries, Phil. And like, while Phil's trying to jump back in, this is always the fun of doing these remotely. Would love to see some questions and some Q&A start to come in. We're having a really great conversation and topic around, how you get your brand and your culture out there to employees, the different ways that you can build your culture. Like, any questions or comments that folks have, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A section of the panel of the webinar. And then once Phil gets back in, we'll start again. So, but what a great conversation so far. You can definitely just hear his passion and hear his belief of how important it is to hire the right folks to build your culture, and to make sure that your culture really represents your people, and really represents the people that you have hired, and also just to make sure that you are building a diverse workplace as well. So we'll give Phil just a second to hop back here, and we'll definitely keep the conversation going. But any questions or Q&A that folks have, please go ahead.
I am back. Sorry about that.
No worries. Can you hear me?
I'm getting better and better at this.
No worries. So I want to just circle back to, one thing you'd mentioned about your culture, especially this time during a pandemic and all the different things that are going on in our organization. Just like knowing that you joined Ringcentral during this stay-at-home period, like how have you personally become part of the culture in your leadership role, and like what do you think has changed now that it's you can't get in front of your team or your employees face to face for the most part? Like, How have you been handling that, and how have you become part of the culture in those essences?
Yeah, I won't deny that it's different than
Yeah.
any new role. And now, not only did I start with a new company for the first time in 24 years, but anytime you think to jobs you've started where you had new teams, this is different than any experience. But here's the couple of things I've learned. First of all, we had to believe it at Ringcentral. We deeply
Right.
do. But you have to, because the solutions we bring to market enable distance meeting and productivity and collaboration incredibly effectively. So one, we have to be a great example of that. And the good news is the company absolutely was. So in that sense, I didn't miss a beat. The second thing is a couple of learnings I had. First of all, we're all in the same situation. It's not that I was limited from meeting with people in person, or I was in a no travel situation, but others were going on and operating in a different way. We were all operating the same way. So that was helpful. And then I could actually identify a few pluses. I mean, interestingly, one, the efficiency in how we're using technology like video and voice and messaging interactively, we're all getting better at it really fast. So that meant more frequent touch and more different and creative and innovative ways has allowed me to engage with people more often than maybe I might have done if I was based in a headquarter location, but I have a employee base that is around the world, worldwide. I mean, you think about the people worldwide always felt like the people at headquarters had a closer interaction. They had the walk-by opportunity. They had options that weren't available to them. Now everybody, I'm meeting my team in London, and they feel as close in proximity to me as my team in Belmont, California, where I might have more employees actually. So that's been different. And maybe the last thing I'll throw out there is, I actually think it's a very inclusive approach that we're all learning, because video and distance meeting is a great equalizer. Some people in a face-to-face meeting are less likely to speak up, but now you can use a chat box. You can use a Q&A element. You can message and get someone's input real time in the meeting, where that might have been considered rude if most people were in person in the meeting. So it's actually bringing more voices in from even people that might not have had as active of a voice in a particular meeting. So, I think we're learning to take the best of it, because I do think some elements of this are going to be our new normal, even when we're post the pandemic. I don't think we are moving to no in-person meetings, but I do think there's an element of this that isn't going to change. More companies are going to have more people working remotely than they did before this pandemic forever, I believe. And so I think there's some really good experiences that we're gaining from this.
What do you, knowing that Ringcentral's, like, you are all at the forefront of this change for kind of work from home and the technology that you've been a part of, when it comes knowing that your role is responsible for the overall revenue of the organization, and I don't know how you all did things before, but this might be a good tip for everyone as well. What are like one or two pieces of advice that you would give to maybe sellers that are on the call today to be able to get your values or your culture and your brand articulated through a video conferencing like this to your customers or to potential customers or prospects, to show like this is the type of value that we have as an organization that we can help you with from a customer standpoint as well?
Yeah, look, I actually think the most important I think message that I know I say to our sellers, and that I would suggest others do, is don't treat it differently. The professionalism you should have shown in an in-person meeting, preparation, aligning your communications, being clear about the outcomes, incredibly respecting your potential customers' time by being crisp on the objectives of the meeting and driving towards those objectives. Every one of those things that makes a great in-person account call are the same things that make a great video-based account call. And the culture of, was it important enough to you to come visit me in person? That's gone, because they don't want you to come visit them in person. They're probably not in person in their own company. So you've already broken down the, this barrier of, am I less of a, am I less personal? Am I treating this as less of a, as a less important opportunity because I'm not physically there? No, that's out the window. So now it's all about your professionalism in the call. So all the things that you should have done to express your mission, to articulate how you're an incredibly innovative culture, how you drive for great customer outcomes, how you understand their business objectives and how your solution can achieve that, and how you bring those approaches. You have to be just as good in a video call of doing that. So don't view it differently. Be as professional, as thorough, as planful, and never let it feel more casual.
No, it's totally fair. And I think with a virtual setting, you also have some advantages because you don't have to travel so you can meet with more customers and those sorts of things. So I agree. Just treat it the same way, the same value and respect that you would give to it. Prepare the same way, and that way the culture of your company comes across. So totally awesome points there. I know one of the things that's going on that we talked about before this meeting was just the growth that Ringcentral is going through, and then also is going to go through that you all have planned. I mean, you're literally trying to grow a company from roughly at $1 billion in revenue and kind of grow to some lofty goals to continue to grow that to potentially 5 billion, 10 billion, continue to grow. Like, what are some of the shifts that you've seen at Microsoft, and then you're potentially going to see at Ringcentral when it comes to your brand and culture as growth takes place at that fast of a scale, that you would kind of highlight and talk about for the group?
Yeah, here's a few things that I would frame on that point. Like, when you're growing fast and you have aspirations to grow really, grow large, you're going to be in a period of continuous change that you have to be able to embrace. Like, it's not all revolutionary change. At times it will feel evolutionary, and other times it will feel revolutionary. Depends on your vantage point, but it's going to be continuous change, which means your executives, your mid-level managers, your frontline managers all have to be great agents of change, and they have to understand what that means. And I think there's, not everybody has to be certified in change management principles. And when you think about change management, often people think, well, that's a discipline you apply to really big, massive changes. Actually, no. The discipline of change management applies to all sizes of change. It's just how heavy of a process and program you put around it. But things like being able to light the road ahead of what a team or an individual is supposed to be doing in this new world, creating excitement, because executive leadership at a company doesn't get to decide if the culture is going to change to embrace and adopt the new programs and the new approach. Employees get to decide that. They vote with their hearts and their minds and their feet, and they come from a place, is this good for me? It's a natural human characteristic. So you have to express to them what success looks like, and show them that you have a plan for helping them be successful. And that's a really important discipline. Communications is incredibly important. Having a thoughtful communication plan, even for small changes, so that the stories are distributed that ultimately get told by everybody else. Because you want that to be what's discussed, and you want everybody to be talking in terms of what you're trying to achieve as an organization. So great communication, great planning, lighting the road ahead, getting all of the people to understand what success looks like and how it can be successful for them, and how you're going to enable their success. Those are all really important principles of change management, and they apply extensively to an organization that's going to be going through continuous growth. We're going to open new markets. We're going to establish new partnerships. Those partnerships are going to create new working approaches, new workflows. We have to be agile in all of those things as we move forward. It's all classic change management principle to be great at it.
Yeah. What would be your advice to, like, let's say you were a manager or a director in a company that's like Ringcentral that's growing. You've got amazing things going on. What would be your advice to those folks that are in roles that are aspiring to continue to grow with the company, maybe go into a higher leadership role, or maybe they're on the front lines, they want to get promoted as well too? Like, what would be your advice to them to, potentially get promoted or grow their career or continue to enhance the culture at a company like yours that is growing so fast? What would be some advice for those folks?
Well, I think that this is one where there's kind of no shortcuts in personal growth. It's have be a person that invests time in learning and development. Every company has a learning and development plan. I always tell them that's like minimally viable. I mean, that's the core things that we want all employees to do. That's the things you kind of need to know. But employees that have aspirations for huge growth should be doing more than that, and they should be understanding what their competencies and experiences are, and they should also understand what competencies and experiences they need to be outstanding or to stand out amongst anybody else that may be going for another position of higher growth. And so they need to invest in their own development and career. They also have to consistently drive results. And there's a formula for driving results and being consistent in execution. I talked about examples during times of change, but it's also the core block and tackling and understanding your core role and being great at that. Maybe the last point I'll make on coaching employees who have aspirations for growth is, look, as you're climbing up an organization, I'm kind of putting it in the camera here, it's a funnel, right? There's less roles. So performing becomes table stakes. Being, a good leader becomes table stakes. Those are, when you start getting farther up the organization, everybody applying for those jobs did all of those things. They're all great leaders. They all had great results. So now you have to be able to articulate why you're better than other great candidates, because it's not you weren't qualified if you didn't get the job. It's usually you got beat by somebody else who had even more qualifications. So what can you do? And I think that's all rooted in having a really thoughtful personal development plan and recognizing that every job is not up. Sometimes you have to take lateral moves to build competencies and experiences that will make you more competitive when the opportunity for you to take on a more senior or leadership role or a broader scope of responsibility.
No, it's totally fair. I was one of the first employees at Glassdoor as they were growing from 7 employees to 400 employees. And some of the best advice that I got from the CEO was just like, hey, our culture and our brand and our company is going to evolve and change quarter to quarter, year to year. And like, your job is to continue to change the culture, but also really just don't get left behind. Like, continue to adapt professionally and personally and continue to grow. So no, that's some awesome advice.
I'll give you one, if you don't mind. I'll share one other story. Yeah, I think it's actually I think it's a really fun, great story on how on a formula for achieving excellence, and it's actually rooted in inclusion. And this was something that we did a number of years back. So it was obviously prior company, prior role. But we did a study, a data-driven analysis of by looking at people's activity and their role and their tenure, what are some of the driving factors of excellence? What stood out? And I want to be clear, even though this is a prior role, prior company, when we did this analysis, because we really did look at people's activity, we anonymized the data. I want to say that right from the beginning. We didn't want to know specifically what Jane or Joe were doing. What we wanted to know was roles and activities as it tied to tenure and performance. And by doing that, we did a pretty detailed analysis. And interesting thing is the most statistically relevant thing that stood out when we looked at top performers versus middle performers. When I call middle, that meant on target performers versus underperformers. The most statistically relevant difference was the size of their network that they engaged with on a regular basis. And network was defined as somebody they met with, somebody they exchanged email with, someone they messaged with, somebody that they were in a meeting that was smaller than 100 people. It didn't count if you were in a meeting with 100 people, but if you were in a meeting with 5. And it looked across organizations. And we kind of looked at that and we said, this was like one of those no duh moments, because we have been saying forever as leaders, and I would say this across industries, that inclusion is incredibly powerful. Well, this was the most data-driven example of the more inclusive a person is, the more ideas that come to them, the more experiences they gain. And in a data-driven way, we were able to show that the best performers include more people in their day-to-day work. They're bringing in more ideas, they're having more experiences. And it became a coaching moment, not only to share that with people about the importance of having a network and bringing them into whatever it is you do, whether it's a pursuit of a customer, whether it's solving a customer challenge because you're on customer success, or it's in finance. It doesn't matter. But it also allowed us to coach our managers on how to help employees be great in looking at, probing questions about who are you involving in this process? Who are you bringing in? Hey, have you thought of this person? And introducing them and helping them build their networks as a way to be successful. So I just share that and say, wow, there's really interesting things that managers can do in the coaching process and for themselves to help them be great.
No, I agree. I think the more, even just thought diversity, just getting different thoughts that are diverse and inclusive when you're trying to make a decision from a culture standpoint or from a leadership standpoint will typically help you make the right decision. And so, this kind of leads to one of the kind of questions that I was thinking about as we prepared for this, is like, how do you, knowing that we're working in more of like a remote work environment, as a leader, how do you ensure that like diverse and inclusion culture is being created, where people are being heard, where different thoughts are being brought to the table, and inclusion is happening when we are working remotely? Like, what are your thoughts there, and how are you thinking about that for Ringcentral?
Yeah, that's I put some of the examples in some of the earlier conversation. It really comes down to listening a lot, and we have lots of listening mechanisms, introducing groups that people can participate in to create a sense of belonging, especially when everybody's remote and some people are more comfortable and more used to working in that environment, and some people are less familiar with working in that environment. So like the gatherings was a great listening mechanism. The employee resource groups and promoting those is a great way to not only introduce more people to participate, but help people understand that there's groups that they can join that give them an opportunity to belong, that actually have always been virtual and remote. And so they're very accustomed to that, and they can participate quickly. And then coaching our managers on how to bring people into meetings. If you're having a team meeting, what are some of the tips and tricks? Like we've not only done that internally, but there's blogs out there and there's webinars that we've done on best practices around working in remote environments, working through distance meeting, that we're making sure our employees have visibility to.
That makes total sense. So we've got a couple of questions already rolling in that kind of pertain to what we're talking about. Love to throw one your way. Jamie has a question around how do you think about sustaining a great workplace and culture while meeting the demands of board, customers, investors, and key stakeholders who hold the purse strings? How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, I hope this doesn't come across as a dismissive answer, or a pithy answer, maybe is the way to say it is. I just don't think you can separate the two. I don't believe you can achieve max performance without consistently keeping that pillar I call it kind of that purpose-driven culture pillar as incredibly important, because your people agenda often falls under that. The how you express yourself in the market and how you express yourself internally is so driven by that. So it can't be two things.
Right.
You have to bring it together as one thing. So when I'm on board meetings, like I've seen this firsthand in my first 100 days at Ringcentral, because I've been in 2 board meetings since then. The company does a really good job at, even when we were talking about a very strategic project that was related to go to market that I was leading, we integrated culture and value conversations into it as a component of how you implement and how you drive success. So whatever it is we're talking about, making sure you're infusing that and not making it its own pillar, that it feels like you have to execute it in some way different and in a different rhythm and in a different process than the rest of the business processes. We try to bring those together as much as we can, and I certainly try to live that. Now, fully understand, like, here's what I'll acknowledge about the question, even if it wasn't explicitly stated. Yeah, you have quarter end pressure, every company does. Then you, depending on where you are in the organization, you have to report to the street. That creates a cycle of pressure. And sometimes those things are, distract from participation even in some of the culture building or even some of the other things. But that's why you have to have a steady rhythm of those. Some of our salespeople find it harder to participate in some of the things that we've launched from a training perspective in the last couple weeks of a quarter, even if it's around culture and brand or other things, because they just can't. But we got to make sure we're also doing that in the first month and the second month. But guess what? Some of our finance people can't participate in the 2 weeks prior to earnings. So the point is you have to continue to fight these things so that you're thinking about the cycles, because every part of the organization may be on slightly different cycles for participation.
No, I think that's a great way to think of it. Like, I think that I'd love to hear that Ringcentral puts your culture and your values and diversity and inclusion as like kind of the first thought. Then it is revenue, the numbers and things like that. And do you think that's why your company is starting to kind of be recognized as a top place to work for diversity and inclusion and for women? Like, I know even on Comparably, you all just had an amazing run in our award season for all the great things that your current employees were saying that you were doing for them around those things. Do you think that's where that starts and where that recognition is coming from?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So full stop, yes. And then I would add to that, and I think you have to, what I've seen at this company, and I would call it a best practice for all, is there has to be you have to be humble and recognize, as good as you are, you're never good enough, right? There's always a better way. So you always have to be listening and always be believing that there's an opportunity for continuous improvement. And then, you have to show that you're listening, and then make sure your video is sort of in line with your audio, right? And that you're then acting on that feedback and showing kind of the closed loop of that, because I do think it's a virtuous cycle. When you show people that you'll do that, they work even harder for you, and they believe even more, and they can represent it even more proudly, and that's just a virtuous cycle to growth.
Awesome. Oh, that's good to hear. So I know we've got about 15 minutes left in the webinar. Please start to add your questions or comments in the Q&A section. We've already got some great questions rolling in, Phil. So I'll throw a few more your way. We have one attendee that wants to go back to your comment around change agents in a company. The question is, do you find, and maybe your move from Microsoft demonstrates that to really develop change, that companies need to hire more from the outside or through the org, that the folks within it level up from a manager standpoint? Like, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, like I think companies should have a philosophy on balance. especially when you're moving people into roles, if you're talking about leadership roles in an organization. And that balance is, it's healthy to bring in new perspectives. It's also important and healthy to promote from within. And if you get off balance in either one of those, there will be you can't look at this, by the way, because you're not filling, depending on the size of the organization, you're not filling these roles on a daily basis. So you have to look at it over a longer time horizon, and you may have a pattern where the last two hires were external, and people will start asking, is this a trend? And then the next two might be internal. But making sure that you're being thoughtful in developing your people, that you have a development plan, that development plan is rooted, that you're recognizing excellence in people. The people that you're recognizing as excellence demonstrate growth mindset and learn it all, have a learn it all culture approach to how they work. If that's integrated deeply in them, they're going to do great. And that's the pipeline of candidates you need, so that you show that there's a career path for people. But even if you do that really well, it's healthy at times, for the right role, for the right circumstance, to bring external talent in too. Sometimes it's because you just don't have somebody in that space ready. Sometimes it's because you're entering a new market or into a new capability, and you didn't have that before, and you want to go tap the experts that are in the market, that have done it, even if it's been at other places.
All right. Okay. Cool. That's totally fair. Another question, I know we've talked a lot about diversity and inclusion and making sure that you're building a diverse and inclusive team. One question that we got is, what do you think leaderships and management teams should be doing to eliminate bias when it comes to hiring externally, but then also looking at your current employees for career advancements and beyond?
The best practice I've seen, in talking to peers, and I've implemented them at times, and tried to be quite consistent in some of these. But one of the best practices is ensuring, as hard as this is, that you have a diverse slate of candidates when filling a role, and diverse in a broader dimension. That can be gender, that can be ethnicity, that can be experiences, meaning internal, having some internal employees and some external employees. That could be having people that have grown up in the industry, and it could be looking at somebody who has some experience in the industry, but maybe not has been exclusively in it. So when I'm using diversity in a broader sense. And then on the panel, the interview panel, ensuring it's not just that you also have diversity in the panel across those same dimensions. Now, when I say those same dimensions, now that's maybe bringing in someone from finance, always having someone from HR, having somebody from, and I'm using the example of finance, if I was in a sales organization, maybe having someone from customer success, having all of those groups represent, and not just your team or your most immediate team as the key decision makers. I think putting those practices in place consistently and saying, hey, I think this is the best person, but I'm still not going to hire that person until I've achieved that objective of having a broad slate and a broad panel in the process, gives you the best chance, I think, of really feeling confident that when you made your selection, it was the right selection.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's number one, making sure that you have that diverse pool of folks that you're looking at for multiple different reasons, and then getting diverse folks in the hiring process and the interview process to make sure, like, there might be something that someone else sees in the candidate that no one else does, that is going to be a great fit for the organization. I can't tell you how many times I've hired amazing people because of something unique they did in college, right, their background, or something they volunteered for, and I was like, oh, that's the reason why I want this person to be part of my team. So I think that definitely does make total sense.
Yeah. Well, let me just add one thing to that. I think there's another important practice that I think is excellent that companies do. It's called succession planning. And succession planning shouldn't be confused with I've already identified the next person. Um, so because even when you do great succession planning, that just ensures that you're thinking about, do I have a talent pool if somebody left tomorrow? But you should still embrace and adopt that practice, because that person will always feel, even you'll feel more certain, and that person will feel like they went through a process that really gave them an opportunity to earn it. And then in succession planning, even when you don't have a job open, it's good to balance the internal talent pool with what I would call talent screening in the market. Put out, look for just leadership talent in the market. Do, network and make sure you have some people that when somebody says, hey, I have a succession plan, here's my slate, that they have a list of internal people that they're grooming and developing that may be in their org or maybe in other orgs, but also that they have a network of that they've been watching the market. They know who talent, what talent's in the market. And these are people we might want to call at the right time if we had a position open as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. We have a question from Sanjay, and I think this is that's a really good question on what we've been talking about. But basically, the question is, too often companies are measured and touted by their financial performance, and many managers use, obviously, numbers just as a driving force to get productivity. How does culture get impacted when there's so much focus on numbers? And what are some things you do to preserve it? Just to make sure that you don't get so focused on the numbers that you forget about your culture.
Yeah, it's being deliberate and ensuring that the communication from the top of the organization and all the way through the organization is balanced in the message. I mean, numbers only tell one part of the story. Under the numbers are some amazing. Let me say this. Sometimes the numbers don't even tell some of the best stories. Sometimes, in sales, it's really easy to talk about the biggest deal. But sometimes it's a deal that just started, and it started small, and in a world of SaaS, it has tremendous opportunity to growth, but it's really innovative. And it's the first one in that industry, and you have to tell that story too. And that's also that's deal related, but then you also have to tell the story of the people that made it happen, and then you have to build the stories that showed the company the kinds of people you have in your organization. We just literally 8:30 to 9:30 this morning Pacific time, we had our monthly, because I talked about earlier in this conversation that we are now doing monthly all hands video based to stay in touch with our employees. Before we had, and one of the topics on the agenda was our CFO presenting some of the background, some of the stories of the financial results, because we just reported earnings earlier. I guess it was back on Monday, and but we didn't start with the CFO. We started with a bunch of just amazing employee stories. One of our amazing people in our organization was just named on the board of the YWCA into a digital leadership position and was recognized as Woman of the Year in that organization. We celebrated that. So we started with a bunch of stories that were just of human interest about amazing people in our organization before we ever got to the financials. And that just takes discipline and awareness that that when you do that, you tell a lot about what matters to the executives and the leadership. And by the way, if your CEO and CFO and president of the company are doing that, guess what the next level management does when they have their meeting? And then what does the next level of management do? Not only do they tell that story, they do it too. So I do think the tone has to start from the top.
Now, I agree, and I think it's also important to understand your people are more than just what they are at work. There's a whole, they're doing all these awesome things in their communities and things like that. So that's totally fair. I think we have time for one last question. I think this is kind of top of mind for a lot of employees and a lot of companies. Is we're all dealing with trying to have our kids do school from home, and we're working a ton of hours. As you think about your culture and your brand, what are you doing to help prevent like employee burnout for your employees
Yeah.
and make sure that there's still that balance? Because, you know, it's hard to know what day it is and where we're all working when we're doing this type of work. So.
Yeah, this is, again, uncharted territory
Right.
in
Yep.
some respects. And, we've done a couple of, I think we are doing deliberate things. Let me say that. We're only as many months into it as everybody else is for the length of this pandemic. So do we know what, we're getting some early feedback, but we also have to recognize that everybody's situation is differently. So that's probably the first thing. We're making sure our managers understand that empathy is really important in a time. It's always important, just to be clear. It's always important, but it's especially important now because you may think, hey, I'm on video and my employees are on video. We're experiencing the same thing. You can never assume you're walking in the same shoes as someone else. You don't know what their home situation is. You don't know whether they have a family member with a comorbidity. You don't know what what hardships this has potentially created that may be above and beyond what you understand. So that's the first thing is just, be balanced and seek to understand and show empathy. We've also done some things company-wide. We've launched a wellness series, including online yoga, meditation, and other education. We're encouraging people that even though there's this trend happening that, well, I can't go anywhere, so I'm not taking vacation.
Right.
Well, staycations are really important to rejuvenating. I should say, even if staycation is the only thing available to you, it's important. Having downtime matters, so we're encouraging our managers to talk to their employees about taking vacation. We're checking in with employees and individuals. We're telling our managers to these things you're saying, we'll do them too, and making sure that they're acting on those things. So those are the kinds of things that we can introduce to help employees avoid burnout. But look, the most important one is just be understanding, be empathetic, and just know that it's people are going through this in their own in their own ways because of their own individual situations.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I agree. It's like you still have you have the time off. Go take it off, even if it's you go and stay at your parents' house or you go do something. Like go do something to where you can disconnect and not have to think about work and make sure because the lines are so blurred right now between personal lives and our work lives. So no,
and I've seen a lot of companies, this isn't just, I'm not even just sharing specific, like I have a lot of peers and friends in the industry. Some companies have introduced a day a month, like on a Friday, that isn't even a vacation day. It's a no scheduled meeting day. And you can do, if you want to do self-study, do that. If you just want to go do exercising and mindfulness and yoga, go do that. If you just want to take the day off, do that. But it's just a day where nobody can schedule meetings. And I've seen others, they're all, I think creativity in expressing those things that doesn't, meeting you have to meet the expectations of the business, but you can do that even better by infusing these kinds of ideas that give to the employees and show them that you're thinking about them during this time, that ultimately help them come back even stronger.
Wow, that's awesome, Phil. It's good to hear you all are doing that. So, well, we're at our time. Phil, this has been awesome. I mean, we talked so much around, really what are the values of a winning culture and doing it within a global brand. Like your insights have been awesome. I feel like we covered a lot of awesome topics and ground around diversity and inclusion, around scaling your culture and brand as your company grows, what leadership's responsibility is when it comes to making sure the culture is happening, even when we do have the demands of numbers that we have to hit. So this was amazing, Phil. Thank you so much for taking an hour out of your time to meet with us. I know I personally learned a lot. And thank you to everybody else who joined us and was a part of this. I know that everyone's schedules are really busy right now. So Phil, thank you. This was awesome. I felt like it was just, you and I having a great conversation, with 100 folks listening, but I hope we get a chance to do this again soon. Be safe, take care of your family, take care of your employees, everybody else out there, be safe as well. And thank you for joining us. This was an awesome hour. Phil, thank you again, and we'll be ready for another webinar here soon. So thank
Thank
you,
you, Derek.
everybody. Thanks, Phil. That was awesome.
Thanks, bye.